She was a bright young teenager who fell hard for an older man.
He was charming and handsome.
She was crazy about him.
They look as they're in a perfect relationship.
But behind their smiling faces, trouble was brewing.
Nobody knew about this secret side of what she was doing.
He had been in trouble with the law.
She was going down a dangerous path.
And when she suddenly disappears, everyone fears the worst.
All the calls went unanswered.
Her family began to get alarmed.
They were taken aback.
Did she take off with her new boyfriend?
The family tell the detectives that she has become more rebellious.
He was living that type of lifestyle that would drive any parent crazy.
Or had her rebellious streak made her easy prey for a sadistic killer?
She would post these ads on the internet.
He had no regard for human life.
With a truth so shocking, no one saw it coming.
There was a second body and a second murder.
Somebody's gonna stand up and go, he's a serial killer. Do you want that on you?
She walked right into the lion's den without even realizing it.
I felt the devil. I mean, I honestly felt the devil.
It's a frigid winter in St. Paul, one of Minnesota's twin cities.
The two main cities here are Minneapolis and St. Paul. They're basically sister cities.
Minneapolis considered the big town, St. Paul, the smaller community.
We have 4 seasons, but the winter time it gets very cold.
It's not uncommon to have temperatures in the single digits or even below 0.
As the sun sets on St. Paul, those frigid temperatures have one young mother worried about her 18-year-old daughter, Brittany Clardy.
Brittany had gone out that morning to run some errands, but by nightfall, she still hadn't returned.
Brittany was living at home at the time with her family, her sister, her mom, her dad. They started to wonder, where's Brittany? What is she doing? And that's when the worry started.
She just isn't like her.
It's cold outside. It's getting dark. Immediately, your heart jumps and you think the worst case scenario, something bad happened.
Brittany's mother tries to reach her daughter by phone, but all of her calls go to voicemail.
She made calls. She received absolutely nothing. Not a word from Brittany.
Come on, baby. Pick up the phone.
She was frantically calling different people. Have you seen Brittany? Have you heard from Brittany?
Consumed with worry, Brittany's parents stay up late into the night, calling her phone over and over again, until they finally get an answer.
Brittany? Is that you?
Imagine calling, trying to reach her, and all of a sudden, the phone answers. Wow, I've got her on the phone. It's her.
Brittany?
But the excitement is short-lived.
Hello? Hello?
She could hear muffled sounds in the background, like something's going on.
There was just a ruffling in the background with nobody talking.
Then all of a sudden, the phone was disconnected.
What she say?
The line just went dead.
What do you mean the line went dead?
It just went dead.
Now the family is convinced that something is seriously wrong with Brittany.
Growing up in St. Paul, Brittany Clardy was raised by protective parents.
Brittany's parents made sure to keep her and her siblings away from the inner city violence that occurred, along with drugs.
This is a family that wanted the best for their children.
Shielded from many of the harsh realities her peers faced, Brittany was able to shine as a student.
Brittany was a very responsible young girl. Her parents and her family trusted her extensively. She had done well in school. She had done well at jobs.
She was very goal-oriented, looking into the future, already working, keeping herself busy.
She had a bright future ahead of her.
After graduating high school, Brittany's confidence in what she could accomplish only grew larger.
Brittany had plans to become a pharmacist.
She was applying to colleges and looking forward to starting a career.
It was around this time that Brittany started hanging out with a handsome young man from the neighborhood, Braxton Green.
She met Braxton in December of 2011, and then they ended up going on their first date on Christmas Eve.
Thanks for letting me steal you away from your family tonight.
They see me enough as it is.
Brittany and Braxton became serious very quickly. He was charming and handsome and swept her off her feet.
Every time he moved, every time he walked, every time he talked, it was Braxton, it's Braxton.
Before long, Braxton became Brittany's new priority.
Brittany floods her social media feeds with Braxton's picture, and they look as if they're in a perfect relationship.
All right, ready? Smile.
Brittany showed off, here's my boyfriend, here we are, had no qualms about it. It was her and Braxton.
Damn, we look good.
But there was one problem. Brittany's parents didn't approve of her new boyfriend.
Have you seen this?
Braxton was a 23-year-old man.
When they first met, Brittany was only 17 years old, and her parents didn't like the fact that she was hanging out with a grown man while she was underage.
Didn't matter to Brittany. She was in love with him. She was crazy about him. Her parents couldn't break that.
Now, Brittany is 18 years old, so she feels more free. I am not going to listen to you, Mom. I am an adult now.
This was the man of her dreams.
Head over heels is a good way to describe it.
But now, Brittany Clardy has vanished, and her parents are beginning to fear the worst after an alarming phone call.
When Brittany finally appeared to pick up the phone after several attempts to reach her, there was no voice, just some muffled noises, and then the phone disconnected.
Subsequent calls go straight to voicemail.
This made Brittany's family very, very concerned.
Brittany's parents decide to check in with her boyfriend, Braxton Green, to see if she's with him.
Hello?
Have you talked to Brittany?
You sound worried.
We are worried. We haven't spoken to her since this morning.
He told her, I have not seen her.
He said that he did have plans with Brittany for earlier that day, but Brittany never showed up.
Brittany's parents wait up all night, hoping she'll return their calls or show up on their doorstep.
I just don't understand.
They had given her the whole night to reach out, but Brittany had not reached out.
By morning, they decide to involve the authorities.
So I understand you're both here about your daughter.
When Brittany went missing, her family contacted the St. Paul Police Department.
She left home yesterday around 11:30.
That's right.
At first, police are reluctant to get involved.
They simply said that she was a runaway or that she would come back and not to worry.
The family, of course, is trying to convince them, hey, this is a very responsible young girl. We need to take this seriously.
And Brittany's parents also provide police with their first suspect.
The family did inform the police of Brittany's relationship with Braxton.
Their theory is Brittany's boyfriend may have something to do with this.
18-year-old Brittany Clardy was in the prime of her life and head over heels for her new boyfriend, Braxton Green.
Braxton, this 23-year-old man, sweeps her off her feet. Braxton is charming, good-looking, and handsome.
Brittany was madly in love with Braxton.
But now, after leaving her parents' home on a chilly morning in the winter of 2013, Brittany has disappeared without a trace.
When she left home, it was 11:30, and by 1 to 1:30, the phone calls had absolutely stopped. There was nothing else.
That is, I would say, a mother's worst nightmare. When your child says, I'm going out to run some errands, and then an hour passes, another hour passes. Next thing you're talking evening.
When she didn't appear at home, mother then called her in as missing.
Brittany's family tells investigators they already have suspicions about what may have happened to her.
They told them they strongly suspected her boyfriend, Braxton.
The family suggested that he may have something to do with her disappearance.
I never liked him.
What don't you like about him?
They said Braxton was a bad influence and that he was leading Brittany in the wrong direction.
He had been in trouble with the law. He had a child by another relationship. Not the ideal person that they would want their daughter to date.
Brittany's parents are also concerned about the way Braxton treats their daughter.
Braxton demonstrated a controlling behavior. When Brittany did not respond to text messages or phone calls, he would become really angry.
He didn't have a full-time job. I mean, he was just always hanging out all the time. He would say, go buy me this, go get me that.
He's a bum, you know? And he's got her doing all this stuff she has no business doing.
Braxton liked to party, which Brittany also joined him in that lifestyle.
You know, Brittany generally lived a very clean lifestyle as a teenager growing up. And having Braxton in her life, he introduced her to partying. He introduced her to the alcohol. He got her into smoking weed.
Brittany's parents had worked so hard to keep her out of that life, but all of that went out the window when she got involved with Braxton.
She started to change. She became more abrasive. She became more confrontational. All of the stuff that goes with drugs and alcohol trickled into her life.
Brittany's parents say they wanted to let their daughter make her own decisions, but they eventually felt the need to intervene.
They had taken steps to try to convince her that maybe she should end the relationship.
Yet Brittany wasn't willing to listen.
Regardless of what Mom says, she was in love with Braxton.
I just know he had something to do with this. That's the only thing I can think of.
At the end of the interview, St. Paul police officially declare Brittany a missing person.
We'll be sure to keep you updated every step of the way.
They also put an ATL on that vehicle as well, attempt to locate. So if anyone were to run her car if they were driving around, then that would come back as a hit.
While the investigators wait for leads to come in, they reach out to their sole person of interest, Braxton Green.
Hello?
Is this Braxton?
Yes, who's this?
I'm calling from the St. Paul Police Department in reference to Brittany Clardy.
And we said, hey, we need your help. We're looking for her.
Do you have a moment to come down this evening and talk about this?
To detectives' surprise, Braxton refuses.
Listen, I really don't have much to tell you.
He was very evasive. I mean, he sent red flags just a flying. Yeah, I don't know where she is either. I've been looking for her. She won't answer her phone. The last I heard, she said she was gonna go take a nap somewhere.
Because he would not come in and talk to them, they put out an APB.
What we found and discovered is that he had an arrest warrant out for him already in a separate domestic-related case. It was either to do with child care or a probation violation or something, but he was being looked for to be placed under arrest.
With Braxton nowhere to be found, for days the investigation hits a standstill. But on February 21st, 10 days after Brittany disappeared, investigators catch a huge break in the case.
The Clardy family received a letter that the car Brittany had been driving was at this impound lot in Columbia Heights.
The tow company also informs them that the car was found in an apartment complex in Brooklyn Park, which is 20 miles from where the family resides.
Investigators immediately head to the impound lot, eager to search the vehicle.
Detectives quickly discover there's a large number of items piled up on that footwell area in the back seat. So very meticulously, they begin to remove these items so they can document each one as they go.
Brittany had an iPhone. They didn't find the iPhone, but they did find 2 burner phones.
We also found what was called a vanilla Visa card, and more prominently a bed sheet that had a very distinct pattern to it.
Underneath the sheet, they find something that stops them dead in their tracks.
We moved the belongings around in the back seat and said, oh my gosh.
There's a body in the back of the car.
Subtract her vehicle to an impound lot in the St. Paul suburb of Columbia Heights.
This was the car that was reported as being connected to Brittany as being a missing person.
Inside, they make a disturbing discovery.
Very quickly, they can see there's somebody's body in the back seat.
The body is nearly frozen solid.
It gets so cold in Minnesota, and that in essence kind of freezes the crime scene or freezes it in time.
It had been below freezing for many days leading up to her discovery, which gives us the ability to preserve some of that physical evidence that's still there. Some of the wounds haven't degraded. The body hasn't begun to decompose at all because it's been frozen.
The body is carefully removed from the vehicle and transported to the medical examiner's office, where they confirm it belongs to Brittany Clardy.
Once her identity was confirmed, that was very difficult news for her family to grapple with. They were still hoping that she was out there alive somewhere.
The parents are just totally devastated. Our daughter's gone.
Their pain is only worsened by the discovery that Brittany suffered a violent death.
The medical examiner found some ligature around the neck, that she had possibly been choked or strangled. They also found many blows to the head.
Brittany had somewhere between 15 and 17 blows to the back of her head. It was likely from a hammer.
Now more than ever, detectives want to speak with Brittany's elusive boyfriend, Braxton Green.
They had to talk to Braxton. We gotta bring this guy in. We gotta talk to him.
As patrol officers continue scouring the city for Braxton, detectives work on submitting a records request for the burner phones found in Brittany's car.
After locating the burner phones, it did set off some red flags for the detectives. They are aware that people involved in illegal activity are prone to use burner cell phones.
The vanilla Visa found in the vehicle also gives detectives pause.
That vanilla Visa is one of those visas where you can use it and no one knows who you are. Why would you need such a product?
Before detectives can answer that question, they get the news they've been waiting for.
Lo and behold, we got notification the boyfriend was arrested. They finally found him.
They were able to finally take him into custody, and they took him to the police station for questioning.
Under questioning, Braxton tells detectives the same thing he told them on the phone, that he has no idea what happened to Brittany.
I already told you everything I know.
He told them I had nothing to do with her disappearance. I have nothing to do with it.
He was denying it.
He tried to make it clear to the police that he did love Brittany. He said he really cared about her and that he would not do anything to hurt her.
When was the last time you saw her?
It was the night before she went missing. Then the next day she called me while she was out running around.
Brittany told him that she was tired and was gonna go to bed and take a nap and would see him later in the day.
We made plans to hang out that night, but a few hours went by and I didn't hear anything. I called her, but she wasn't answering.
He denies knowing about where she would have been that day. He denied having anything to do with her disappearance.
When it becomes clear that Braxton isn't going to offer up a confession, detectives try a different tactic.
They kept asking him, okay, if you didn't do anything to her, do you have anything that you know of that was going on in Brittany's life that would have led to her possibly being murdered?
We found burner phones and a disposable Visa in Brittany's car. Now, what can you tell me about that?
Police kept pressuring and pushing That's when he told them something that they never thought of.
We did not expect this in any way, shape, or form.
Braxton told them that Brittany had engaged in online prostitution.
After 10 days of searching for missing Minnesota teenager Brittany Clardy, detectives made a disturbing discovery: the young woman's dead body in the back seat of her abandoned vehicle.
She had been strangled. She was struck in the head with a blunt object.
She was brutally murdered.
Now, less than 24 hours later, police have tracked down their prime suspect, Brittany's 23-year-old boyfriend, Braxton Green.
Braxton had refused to come in and speak with detectives. Now they had him in custody, and he was denying any involvement in this crime.
However, Braxton has admitted something else to the detectives, something they never could have imagined.
He said Brittany had been posting ads on sexual service websites and was engaging in sexual relations with clients for money.
Police find the claim hard to believe.
That came as a big surprise to the investigators.
It just didn't fit her profile. Didn't fit anything about her.
But Braxton insists he's telling the truth.
Were you pimping her out?
Hell no. I didn't even like that she was doing it. But she wanted the money.
Working in a recreation center, the pay wasn't just enough, and she wanted to buy things. She needed some extra cash, so she started thinking, how can I do it?
I don't feel like the prostitution is indicative of like who she was or her character. I think it was more, this was her first stab at independence and making her own decisions for herself.
She went on this one website a lot called Backpage or something like that.
The detectives are familiar with Backpage. At the time, it had become a notorious site for prostitution and sex trafficking.
People would go on there and say, these are the things they're willing to do for this amount of money.
Braxton said Brittany would make calls with those possible clients through her burner phones, and that's how she would engage in customers.
At first, Brittany wasn't offering sex.
It started off where she would just do massages, but then she wanted the money you got for doing other stuff.
Although he didn't approve of what she was doing, Braxton says he would sometimes accompany Brittany when she met up with a client.
He admitted to police that at times he would go out on some of those calls with Brittany, and he would sit outside and wait for her in the car or whatever. It was a safety measure, make sure nothing bad happened.
Some of these guys were sketchy. I didn't want her getting hurt.
Do you know if she met with any of these clients around the time she went missing?
I don't know, but she was talking about needing money, so I wouldn't be surprised.
By the end of the interview, detectives are starting to believe that Braxton is telling the truth.
He was very cooperative. He handed over his phone, all his information.
Braxton's phone, it was pinging off of towers that were not anywhere near the location of where Brittany's body was found.
He's in a different part of the Twin Cities metro area, not even close. Long story short is that we came out of the interview satisfied, thinking that he was not involved in her disappearance or in her death.
Now, the detectives have a new theory about what happened to Brittany.
They were beginning to think her murder might have been related to her activities as an escort.
Our eyebrows raised and thought, well, maybe there's something here.
Detectives decide to canvass the apartment complex in Brooklyn Park where Brittany's car had been impounded.
The police had great reason to believe that Brittany was last alive, perhaps in Brooklyn Park.
So the investigation was extremely extensive. I mean, we were canvassing the area, pulling cameras in the area.
They knocked on doors all over that location, but no one remembered seeing Brittany or even knew who she was.
However, detectives make more progress when they get their hands on the data from Brittany's burner phones.
These records, they're voluminous. There's many dozens, if not hundreds of pages. What they find is in the last few hours of the afternoon of February 11th, Brittany's got some contacts with an Atlanta area code number.
It was a phone that was actually purchased and registered in the name of Alberto Palmer.
It gave them the key to this entire investigation.
This case through her phone records.
Now, detectives think they found the key to solving Brittany's murder buried in the call log of one of her burner phones.
Police discovered that Brittany had been in contact with a 25-year-old man named Alberto Palmer on the day that she disappeared.
There were several phone calls and messages that took place in the early afternoon hours of February 11th, even going back a couple days before that, about potentially Brittany providing some massage services to Mr. Palmer.
We did some work on the name Alberto Palmer. We found out that Mr. Palmer had a warrant out for his arrest out of a city called Chamblee, Georgia, and that's just outside Atlanta.
The reason for the warrant immediately sets off alarm bells.
He's wanted there for violent attacks against sex workers.
There were 3 different assault cases out of Chamblee, Georgia, involving Alberto, all 3 of which were females that were involved in prostitution and had gone over to his residence. And in all 3 cases, he had physically assaulted these females.
Had he done the same to Brittany Clardy? When investigators subpoena Alberto's phone records, they learn that he's recently been in communication with a family member who lives near where Brittany's car was found.
It was a few blocks from where the car was located, so now we have an address in Brooklyn Park.
He had actually ordered pizza to that address, I believe on the 11th, around where Brittany Clardy was murdered.
So now we're very curious.
However, more recent cell phone pings suggest that Alberto may have left Brooklyn Park in the days since Brittany's disappearance.
Alberto's phone number is going to a house in Woodbury, Minnesota. Brooklyn Park is on the west side. They're like 25, 30 miles apart.
So it's complicated the case a little bit because we had 2 separate locations. We had to plan basically simultaneous warrants at both locations.
On March 6th, the investigators launched their coordinated strike.
We were able to pretty much hit the Brooklyn Park location and the Woodbury location pretty close at the same time.
They do what's called the knock and talk. We're just going to knock on the door, see who answers, and see if they know anything.
In Brooklyn Park, Alberto Palmer's family member comes to the door.
Hi, can I help you?
Yes, ma'am. We're with the St. Paul Police Department.
As the police talk to her, they find out, Alberto was in fact at that place on February 11th, the day that Brittany disappeared.
Alberto's family member agrees to show police the room where he had stayed.
Sure, come on in.
Thank you.
There appeared to be a cleanup inside as there were large bleach spots in one of the bedrooms.
She says, oh yeah. Then there was that day that I came home and he said he had spilled Kool-Aid and he made me help him clean it up.
So literally just pouring bleach on spots in the carpet.
Investigators don't think the stains were made by Kool-Aid.
They fairly easily pull up the carpet to reveal the blood that had soaked through into the subfloor. And at this point, they know this is likely the crime scene. This is likely where Brittany Clardy was killed.
Investigators' suspicions are all but confirmed when they show Alberto's family member a photo of the bedsheet they found covering Brittany's body.
It was a very distinctive pattern on the sheet.
It was a picture of a bed sheet that was hers that she knew was in their apartment.
Oh my God, yeah, that's my bed sheet, that's it.
The sheet that was used to cover Brittany Clardy in the car, we've now been able to trace back to coming from that residence.
Meanwhile, police officers across town are able to take Alberto Palmer into custody at the home in Woodbury, Minnesota, where his cell phone last pinged.
We were able to arrest the suspect without incident.
He had his backpack with him right where he was arrested. in his backpack was Brittany's iPhone.
Investigators immediately transport Alberto back to the station for questioning.
He's brought to the Anoka County Sheriff's Department where he gives an interview.
Alberto begins the interview by revealing some forthcoming information about his past.
I was diagnosed bipolar.
Okay.
I was going through therapy for over 10 years for anger problems, as well as I've been in a mental institution 3 times.
Alberto tells police he didn't do anything to Brittany Clardy, at least not that he can remember.
I tend to black out. It's hard for me to just remember things.
Is it black out and then do things that you would never dream of doing in real life?
Exactly.
For several hours, he denies knowing anything to do with Brittany's murder or even knowing Brittany.
But as the interrogation heats up, Alberto starts to tell a different story.
We would give him details, then it was like jogging his memory of what had taken place.
I need you to really dig deep into your noggin, and I want you to come out with the rest of it, because you know what happened.
I mean, Detective, I'm telling you what I remember.
Eventually, he acknowledges that he had solicited Brittany for sexual services. He acknowledged they had some degree of sex.
And finally, after hours of unrelenting interrogation, Alberto makes a shocking confession.
When I realized, what you just did, I honestly felt the devil inside of me.
Brittany is someone who made choices that some of us might question if we would make ourselves. And for others, it allows us to almost throw those folks away in our culture, that they're no longer worthy of our love, support, or resources. But we need to look to someone in such a vulnerable state as someone who deserves our love, attention, resources, and support, not our condemnation.
Nearly a month after 18-year-old Brittany Clardy vanished, Minnesota police have arrested Alberto Palmer for killing her and hiding her body.
During the interview, he was giving some information, but not coming clean with all the details of what had occurred.
Okay. All this, I'm stressed out, and just a lot of times I tend to forget things. I tend to black out.
He had remembered only bits and pieces.
But when Detective LaFamme confronts Alberto with the blood evidence they found in his family member's Brooklyn Park apartment, he starts to open up.
It's very, very clear from what happened up in Brooklyn Park that there was a lot of effort put into cleaning the room up, okay? There was a lot of effort to put this young lady in the car and to cover her up.
According to Alberto, he was experiencing one of his blackouts until it was too late.
First thing I saw was when I was putting on a car shirt.
Okay.
Honestly, the only thing I remember is going in the car.
Alberto tells Detective LaFamme it was like he was possessed by an evil spirit.
When I realized, what you just did, I felt the devil. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm satanic or nothing, but just I felt the devil.
Yeah. What else was the devil doing?
Alberto claims he doesn't remember anything else that happened that night. But when investigators resume questioning the next morning, they have a breakthrough.
In our second day of interviewing, Sergeant Russ had a go at him. I had been the nice detective, and Russ went in and took a little bit of a different approach, which was really effective.
I've dealt with a lot of cases similar to yours as far as, possessions and people getting possessed by a devil and poltergeist, like that, right? I get it, dude. You can get possessed, happens to you, and you're like, what the f am I doing? I get it, and I've dealt with it, and that's kind of why I deal with a lot of people when I came in and try and give you a one-last shot here, right? Mike's a decent guy, but he's not real good with the being possessed. You know what I'm saying? So what happened?
You got a pen?
You want to write it? So you get, all right, man, all right. Tell me it's recorded.
Alberto admits that on February 11th, while his family member was at work, he invited Brittany over to have sex.
He says that at some point they began to tussle, I believe were his words.
As we was having sex, it's like we started to fight. And as we fighting, it's like we tussling in the room on the bed.
What are you doing? Get off me!
He describes that he choked her.
I choked her to the point where she was just laying there.
He choked her to the point of unconsciousness, believing she was dead. And while he was gathering himself, realized that she was still alive.
Alberto says he knew he couldn't let Brittany leave after what happened between them.
So I ran in the kitchen and was looking in the drawer.
He went through the kitchen drawers, found a hammer, brought a hammer up to the room.
As I ran back in the room, she was trying to get past me. He was still touching me again. So I hit her. I just kept hitting her. And it's like I couldn't stop.
He couldn't give an exact amount of times, but brutally hit her on the head numerous times until she wasn't moving anymore.
Once Brittany was dead, Alberto says he came up with a plan to get rid of her body.
The only thing I think is like, nah, I have to get this away from you. And that's when I put it in the car.
He admitted to taking the car up to the apartment lot and walking back, disposing of the keys on the way.
Immediately following Alberto's stunning confession, police charge him with first-degree murder.
You made a mistake. You're going to stand up and be accountable and responsible for that.
Based off of his previous altercations in Georgia and then him coming to Minnesota and doing the same thing, it seemed like he definitely was developing into somewhat of a psychopathic killer.
It was a relief to have him off the streets, so he couldn't hurt any more young women.
But before Alberto stands trial, investigators on the opposite side of the Mississippi River make a grisly discovery.
In May of 2013, a body had been found in the trunk of a car that was in an impound lot in Minneapolis.
When word of the events reaches detectives in St. Paul, they're struck by the similarities to Brittany's murder.
It was eerily similar to the Clarity case, so right away Alberto was kind of a person of interest.
The new victim is identified as 24-year-old Clarissa Cook, a young woman who lived in Brooklyn Park.
She had also been advertising escort services on Backpage.com. And upon doing some search warrants on her phone number, we were able to find out that Alberto was the last person that Clarissa's phone had any communication with.
Crime scene evidence eventually reveals that Clarissa was killed in the same apartment where Brittany Clardy's life was taken.
Blood samples did come back to Clarissa.
Armed with this new evidence, prosecutors believe they have what they need to convict Alberto of both murders. But to avoid a painful trial for the victims' families, they decide to offer him a plea deal.
One of the things we talked with the Clardy family about is anytime you go to trial, if somebody's convicted, that's not the end of it. A conviction will automatically go to Supreme Court on appeal. The family didn't want to go through that emotional roller coaster.
In exchange for pleading guilty to the murders of Brittany Clardy and Clarissa Cook, Alberto manages to avoid a life sentence.
What this means is Mr. Palmer serves 30 years before the possibility of parole. The minute he's paroled, if he ever is, he begins his 40-year sentence for the murder of Brittany Clardy. So likely Mr. Palmer will never be released from custody.
For the loved ones of Alberto Palmer's victims, it's a bittersweet conclusion to an unthinkable tragedy.
Both Brittany and Clarissa were very young females. They had their whole entire lives ahead of them.
It's sad and very tragic what happened.
Brittany was a very responsible girl. Brittany did all the right things, and nobody knew about this secret side of what she was doing. Her family didn't as well. It can happen to anyone, so all people, all parents need to be really vigilant.
Brittany is all of us. I think we all need to be really honest about how vulnerable we all are in any given day.
She was the woman who had it all. So why would she decide to take her own life?
She had a good job, a good family, good friends.
Marla wouldn't kill herself. She would never do that.
As the suicide investigation unfolds, rumors swirl, suggesting her storybook life was hardly the fairy tale it seemed.
The love of money is the root of all evil. She just had to get out of the situation.
He had a suspicion she was cheating on him.
Now a seasoned detective is on the case to ferret out the truth. Was this the last move of a desperate woman, or the cowardly act of a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Everybody argues in the show, and it escalates to a point where a person loses their temper. Now, I wouldn't have to do that.
The physical evidence was just baffling. No one knew what to make of it.
We were lost. We had no direction.
Came in session to me.
OJ isn't the only one with a dream team. We had a dream team.
Tuesday, May 20th, 2008. It's a balmy spring morning in Prince George's County, Maryland, just across the state line from Washington, D.C.
Prince George's County happens to be the highest wealth of a predominantly African-American community in the country.
The vast majority of people commute to Washington, D.C. to work for the government.
But this otherwise typical morning is about to get an unexpected jolt when a tragic call comes into 911 area dispatchers.
Prince George's County 911 Center. What is your emergency?
The man on the line identifies himself as 48-year-old Spencer Chase.
I just came back in my house and my wife is on the kitchen floor face down with something around her neck. Can you please get right away? Yes, sir. Okay. Oh, my God.
Spencer tells the dispatcher that his wife, Antoinette Chase, is unresponsive and needs immediate help.
You indicated that, well, perhaps she hung herself.
She's on the floor. She looks unconscious. Please, somebody hurry up, please.
The 911 operator in the report calls it out as a potential suicide.
Moments later, sirens blare as first responders race to the couple's home.
Officer, help her, please. Help her. Sir, we'll do everything we can. Step over here for me, please.
Prince George's County first responders, medics, and police found Antoinette face down on the floor in the kitchen with a extension cord wrapped around her neck.
While medics attempt life-saving procedures, responding officers comfort Antoinette's overwrought husband.
When personnel responded to the house after the 911 call, they actually transported Antoinette Chase to Prince George's Hospital.
For Antoinette's husband of 15 years, this seems like a terrible dream, but the nightmare is just beginning. And by the time it's over, the reality will be far worse than anything anyone could have imagined.
This is a story that just shows you what happens when people are pushed to the brink and the astonishing lengths that they will go to keep what they have.
Antoinette Chase was born into a large and loving family in Washington, D.C. on December 13th, 1961.
Antoinette is the baby. She's the last of the 6.
With 2 boys and 4 girls, Antoinette's family had their fair share of sibling rivalries. But by all accounts, Antoinette was the family peacekeeper.
She was just very easy to be around. Never complained. Always the one compromised to get along with everybody.
After excelling in high school, Antoinette earned a place at one of the nation's most prestigious black colleges, Howard University.
She graduated from Howard University, and she did very well there.
She got married to her high school sweetheart, Terry, and settled just outside of D.C. in Prince George's County.
She got a job with our federal government and the Small Business Administration doing some clerical work.
With the birth of her daughter Monique in 1983, Antoinette's life felt complete.
My sister was a great mother. Very loving, very affectionate.
I could come to her with whatever it was that was bothering me. We were very close.
But the pressures of raising a daughter while also trying to climb the ladder of public service took a toll on Antoinette's marriage. By 1989, she and her husband had drifted apart.
They got divorced in 1989. Monique's father was pretty much out of the picture, and Antoinette was preparing to go it alone.
A whole new direction. In the summer of 1990, at her 10-year high school reunion, Antoinette reconnected with a charming teddy bear of a man named Spencer Chase.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm Antoinette.
I know exactly who you are.
She didn't remember him.
Spencer let it be known that he had an eye on her, even back in high school.
I've always wanted to date you, but you were always taken.
Look at you.
Big-hearted and down-to-earth, Spencer made a great first impression.
It's not a job that's gonna get me rich, but I'm able to take care of my son, which is very important to me, and I get to help people.
Spencer worked at the Washington Center for Aging Services. He worked in the maintenance department. Well, I'm a single parent, too.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder what else we have in common.
Despite their obvious chemistry, Antoinette hesitated when Spencer asked her out.
Antoinette had recently been divorced, and she wanted to take her time jumping into a new relationship.
I promise I'll take it slow.
You're making this really hard for me to say no.
Eventually, Antoinette decided to give Spencer a shot. And once she did, the two single parents never looked back.
He was a very loving person. While my mother and he were dating, they spent a lot of time together.
They seemed to enjoy each other's company. They talked almost every day.
By the time Antoinette and Spencer tied the knot 4 years later, they had already created a beautiful blended family.
Who wants ice cream? Come on. Come and get it. How you doing?
Spencer's son considered Antoinette to be somewhat of a second mom.
Even though Spencer's son lived with them only part-time, he and Antoinette had a special bond. Much like the bond Antoinette's daughter Monique had with Spencer.
When I was a little kid, Spencer was my superhero. I didn't grow up with my father, and Spencer was always there for me.
Shortly after she and Spencer said I do, Antoinette landed an exciting new job with the Department of Homeland Security.
She was a smart woman and very ambitious, and her career started to take off.
The couple enjoyed the new lifestyle Antoinette's success afforded them, and all the material trappings that came with it.
She lived to shop. She starts when the mall opens, and still there as it's closing.
But apparently, Spencer was no slouch either when it came to spending.
He liked to buy new clothes, he liked to buy new shoes.
And the couple's penchant for living large wasn't just limited to day-to-day purchases. In 1996, the family bought a 2-story home in an upper-middle-class neighborhood of Prince George's County. But with mortgage payments to meet and their less-than-frugal spending habits putting a strain on their finances, Antoinette and Spencer struggled to keep their heads above water.
It just wasn't enough money to support that type of lifestyle with them having a brand new house.
In the early 2000s, they faced foreclosure on their home.
After downsizing to a much smaller and more affordable rental home, the couple started doing some serious soul-searching.
Both Antoinette and Spencer turned to religion.
In keeping them, there is great reward. And see, these material things, none of them matter without God.
They started to move up in the church, taking on more responsibilities.
Forever and ever. Amen.
They actually both became pastors.
With both their spiritual and financial priorities back in order, the couple slowly dug themselves out of their financial hole.
They bought a new house.
She seemed to be really happy. He cared about her. They were happy together.
With their life together back on the upswing, no one could have predicted the terrible events that would befall Antoinette and Spencer on the morning of May 20th, 2008.
Somebody please come and help her, please. Okay, she's not breathing. No, ma'am. I'm trying to get you so glad.
The first assumption was that she had committed suicide.
But if Monique had really tried to kill herself, what could have pushed her over the
Outrageous new details.
After weathering a rocky financial crisis, it seemed DC area couple Antoinette and Spencer Chase were back on top of the world in 2008.
Their home had fallen into foreclosure, but they found God. They spent a couple of years saving, and before they knew it, they had dug themselves out of that hole and they were in a brand new home.
But just when their lives seemed to be looking up, everything came crashing down.
Spencer found Antoinette on the floor with an extension cord around her neck.
This is possibly a suicide attempt.
First responders took Antoinette to Prince George's County Hospital Center.
Though anxious to be at his wife's side, Spencer agrees to answer some routine questions at the scene.
Who else lives here? My stepdaughter, Monique. When was the last time you saw her? This morning about 7:30. I think she started a new job.
What were you doing before you found Antoinette?
I was running errands.
He didn't go to work that day. Again, he said that Antoinette was preparing to get ready for work. About 9:30 in the morning, he'd gone out to her car, started it up to warm it up, and then left the garage door open, along with the interior garage door into the house.
Spencer says when he returned from running errands a couple of hours later, he found Antoinette's car still running in the driveway.
That's when you found her?
Yes, sir. Can we continue this later? I need to be with my wife.
Of course.
After notifying Antoinette's daughter Monique that her mother is in critical condition, Spencer hurries to the hospital. No sooner have Spencer and Monique arrived than doctors break the devastating news.
The doctor came in and he's like, your mother didn't make it. And I just remember grabbing my jacket and screaming into my jacket like, oh my God. Like, I just saw her this morning. Like, what do you mean? My life doesn't have any meaning.
Shortly after receiving word of Antoinette's death, Spencer and Monique are greeted in the waiting room by a detective with Prince George's County Police.
Spencer and I went back to wait in the family waiting room, and a detective came in. He introduced himself saying he was from the suicide division. And I was confused. I'm thinking, suicide? My mother wouldn't kill herself. Where did you do suicide?
Well, that's the way the call came into 911.
When I walked in and I seen her on the floor, she had this cord around her neck. And that's how I called it in.
Mama wouldn't do that.
Monique is right. My wife wouldn't do that, man.
Spencer said he knew of no reason that Antoinette would want to hurt herself.
She had a good job, good family, good friends.
She loved and adored her daughter, Monique.
Despite the family's portrait of a woman with so much to live for, detectives aren't ready to rule out suicide.
If y'all need anything, just please feel free to let me know.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
In certain instances, people are able to keep their depression close to their vest and they're able to commit suicide against what everybody else possibly knows.
Meanwhile, back at the Chase residence, lead detectives Ben Brown and Billy Watts are busy trying to determine whether Antoinette's death was truly self-inflicted.
We met the responding patrol officers that had stayed at the scene.
The officers showed them where Spencer parked and warmed up Antoinette's car and explained that the garage and house door were left open for several hours while he was out running errands.
Then patrol officers lead detectives into the kitchen where Antoinette's body was found.
This is where we found the body. She was facing down the hallway.
You could see where Antoinette had been lying. There was the small pool of blood, and there was a 6-foot extension cord laying there. Right above that was a banister for the stairwell. It was obvious right away that the only way that she could have hung herself would have been from the banister above the kitchen.
Yet a closer examination of the railing makes this seem unlikely.
The banister was completely intact.
Antoinette is approximately 5'7", maybe 180 pounds.
Based on the information I had about her size and weight, it was clear that it would have broken off. And the opening of the banister was so small, I didn't think that Miss Chase could actually fit through that spot to hang herself.
But if Antoinette Chase hadn't hung herself, what had happened? New evidence is about to surface that will make the answer to that question even murkier and throw the case into complete turmoil.
The physical evidence makes you scratch your head and wonder what really happened and why.
Although the death of 46-year-old wife and mother Antoinette Chase was reported as suicide, detectives in Prince George's County, Maryland now suspect something else.
The physical evidence suggested it was not a hanging, but it was not by natural causes either.
With autopsy results still pending, detectives begin treating Antoinette's death as a possible homicide.
The first thing to do is determine what could potentially show as to a motive and who could have potentially been involved in this particular case.
Detectives at the scene discovered an open door, which Spencer claims he accidentally left open after starting Antoinette's car for her. This discovery raises the possibility of a home invasion.
Someone perhaps got into the house somehow because of his negligence.
Maybe this was a robbery that went bad.
Looking for signs of an intruder, detectives sweep the premises.
We found, as near as we could tell, no drawers open, no doors busted in, nothing disturbed. Valuables appeared to be in place.
Spencer told the detectives that he had left Antoinette's car running the whole time he was running errands.
Why would burglars have left a car in the driveway with the key in the ignition?
Though detectives suspect that robbery may not be the motive, they can't eliminate much else.
They didn't know enough about Antoinette to know if she had any enemies or secrets. And with no obvious evidence of an intruder, detectives had to consider another possibility. Spencer Chase could have been lying to detectives and been involved in the crime.
Before detectives track down Spencer for questioning, the autopsy results come in and confirm their suspicions.
Thank you. It's not a suicide anymore. It's a homicide.
The coroner ruled that it was indeed a homicide, that the cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation.
We were told that an extension cord was used. It was wrapped twice around the neck.
The ligature marks at autopsy suggested that the person would have pulled the extension cord from behind.
You could see that Antoinette had actually tried to pull it off her neck. It takes about 15 seconds for the person to pass out while being strangled, and then it can take several minutes beyond that to get to a point where the person is actually dead.
This wasn't some instantaneous death. This was a violent, struggle-filled, very tragic, and
every time I would close my eyes, I would imagine her kicking and just like fighting for her life.
Armed with the knowledge that Antoinette was in fact murdered, detectives set up a meeting with Spencer Chase and present him with the coroner's findings.
Was there potential that an intruder came in the house, or that you guys had some type of argument? So based on that, because in my mind, I don't know exactly what happened, and I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Everybody like argues, and so it escalates to a point where a person loses their temper. I would never do that to her. I love her too much. She's been too good to me.
He told the police the same story he had told her before. He was out the whole morning, and he came back to the tragedy.
I left out this morning running my errands. When I came back, I found Antoinette unconscious. And what about she has died?
He said he went to the bank to withdraw money, he went to a Burger King, and he went to a CVS.
He was specific to tell us that the receipts for those errands were on the kitchen counter.
What's hard for me to understand and comprehend is the fact that there's no signs of forced entry. The house is not disturbed in any way, nothing's taken.
But then, Spencer says something surprising.
Did you find a pocketbook this time? Did you find a phone in it? No. Said that Antoinette's purse and her 2 cell phones, being her personal and work phone, were missing.
Her wedding rings are missing.
If what Spencer is on the table,
This didn't look like a typical robbery. But what if a thief entered the house, panicked, killed Antoinette, grabbed the first valuable things he saw, and then fled on foot?
when detectives return to the Chase residence, everything Spencer told them appears to check out.
These receipts that he told detectives about, they were all laid out perfectly on the counter, and they were all time-stamped.
And Antoinette's personal effects were nowhere to be found.
Detectives hope these missing items can lead them to whomever committed this crime, and they have a plan to find them.
If the cell phone is on, you can actually ping it and see if you can triangulate things and actually locate the cell phone where it currently is located.
But more than 12 hours into the investigation, time is running out.
All cell phones, obviously, the battery will die. And once that battery dies, the signal is lost, and you no longer can track the phone.
After racing to court to obtain a warrant for Antoinette's mobile data, police begin working with a cell phone company. It's soon determined that one of her phones remains active.
They were able to ping the cell phone and locate its approximate whereabouts.
The area was approximately 6 miles away from Chase's home.
It was a very marshy area with a small stream that ran adjacent to the area we believed it to be in the back of a shopping center.
That night, detectives Billy Watts and Ben Brown scour the wooded area in search of Antoinette's cell phone.
We used our flashlights and kind of walked in a line, looking for any kind of evidence.
At that point, we were unsuccessful in locating anything based on the fact that it was dark.
I don't think we're going to find anything tonight in this. We need to wait.
We determined at that point that we would come the next day, and we would elicit the assistance of our police academy.
It seems like a good plan, but there's a hiccup.
The problem we ran into was the next day, the 21st of May, the phone had actually died. So we went back to the last known location. We did a search with the academy class, and unfortunately, we didn't locate the phone.
Now, with this key piece of evidence seemingly lost forever, Detective Brown must face every investigator's worst fear.
Whoever did this just might get away with murder.
24 hours after Antoinette Chase's murder in Prince George's County, Maryland, the investigation is at a standstill.
Detectives hope finding Antoinette's cell phone and some other missing personal items could give them a clue as to who killed her. Problem is, after a massive search, they came up completely empty-handed.
Desperate for a lead, Detective Ben Brown digs into the call logs from Antoinette's cellular provider.
I wanted to research and see who Antoinette may have been talking to and what those persons could have had as far as information about her lifestyle.
While most calls are family or work-related, a couple of repeat numbers remain unidentified. Cold calling reveals they have one thing in common.
They were both males, which leads detectives to wonder why a happily married woman might be calling so many different men.
After probing deeper, detectives discover something curious.
Both of the men they talked to said the exact same thing.
They were just friends and there was no relationship involved other than just a friend that she might talk to for advice.
She didn't feel like she could trust Spencer with financial matters, and frankly, the two were having serious marital problems.
Of course, this strongly contrasts with what Spencer had told him, because he had never mentioned any problems with Antoinette.
In an attempt to develop a clearer picture of the relationship, police turn to Antoinette's family and friends. They corroborate what Antoinette's two male friends had suggested, that behind its perfect veneer, Spencer and Antoinette's marriage was deeply troubled.
It just seemed like it just went downhill, all of a sudden.
They say after the couple moved into their new home in 2007, Antoinette continued to climb the ladder at work, but Spencer was still punching the clock at the same job he'd held for years.
When my mother and Spencer first got together, he actually earned more than she did. But as the years went on, it got to a point where he was only earning about 20 to 25% of what she earned.
While Antoinette did everything she could to make sure Spencer knew the income discrepancy didn't bother her, Spencer seemed willing to spend Antoinette's hard-earned money any way he saw fit. And this is after the couple had already weathered one personal financial crisis.
Well, here's one right here, and it has really low mileage.
Shortly after we moved, they bought a new Mercedes. My mother actually wanted to get a pre-owned one because she didn't want to spend that kind of money. But Spencer really pushed her for the brand new car.
I think you should just get a new one. You get what you pay for.
He made her believe that she was supposed to do these things for him. One of her biggest flaws was she never knew how to say no.
Chase family friends say that despite these hard times, Spencer ultimately landed a job opportunity that had the potential to put him on equal financial footing with Antoinette.
Eventually, he did find some work. He made great money.
Spencer got a job as a mortgage broker. It was going to give him a chance to make a lot more money and have a higher status professional position.
But after receiving his first paycheck, Spencer didn't sock it away as Antoinette hoped. When the bills for Spencer's birthday party started rolling in, Antoinette went into shock.
He spent $3,500 on a birthday party for himself.
The next month, when it was time to pay the mortgage, he didn't have any money to contribute towards it. So it really made her furious that he would spend like that just on himself when they had a household to cover.
Shortly thereafter, Spencer lost his cushy new job. Fed up, Antoinette moved out with her daughter.
During the time that Antoinette was separated from Spencer, she seemed to be happier.
But then, the unthinkable happened.
Spencer Chase attempted suicide by taking pills.
They did take him to the hospital to pump his stomach. They actually put him on a 48-hour watch to make sure that he didn't try to harm himself again.
To some, Spencer's suicide attempt seemed like nothing more than a desperate ploy to hold on to Antoinette.
He took a dose that wouldn't have caused his death, but made it look like he was trying to commit suicide.
I said to her, walk away, let it go. Her response to me was, sis, I can't do it because I don't want God to hold me responsible for his blood being on my hands.
She came and talked with me about him coming to stay with us because she didn't feel like he could make it on his own.
But apparently, it wasn't long before Spencer and Antoinette's relationship started to sour again.
His work ethic just kind of went downhill, and the money that he was making wasn't there anymore.
He really wasn't earning an income. So now my mother and I are taking care of the rent, and he's basically just hanging around, not really carrying his weight.
Though Antoinette couldn't bring herself to get rid of Spencer, she could no longer stand being around him.
My mother was tired of him. She would start going into work a little later and staying really late.
Antoinette's family says her efforts to distance herself from Spencer triggered suspicions of infidelity.
Spencer believed that Antoinette not coming home at her normal time of 6, 7 o'clock was a direct result of her possibly seeing somebody else.
So what's your excuse tonight?
I was working, Spencer. He was always accusing her of seeing somebody else. He would call the job many times. If she didn't answer it, then he would call the cell phone.
Well, if you working, why you didn't answer my damn call?
How many times do I have to tell you that when I'm at work, I cannot answer my phone?
Finally, Spencer took things one step too far.
He actually had a friend of his pull her phone records to see who she was calling. We told her you could go to the police for that because whoever did it, he didn't have a right digging into your private personal business.
Family members say that after the cell phone incident, Antoinette made a decision. On Sunday morning, May 18th, 2008, while driving to church, she told Spencer it was over.
I don't think this is working anymore. She went into telling him that she was ready for him to move out and that she was going to give him 30 days.
To Antoinette's surprise, Spencer agreed.
I don't think I had the heart to say it, but yeah, I think probably enough is enough.
He was willing to move on and agreeing to them separating.
That was just the happiest I've seen her in a long time.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
While it's suspicious to detectives that Spencer withheld this information from them during their initial interview, nothing about it makes him a murder suspect.
By Antoinette's own admission to friends before her death, the couple's separation was 100% amicable.
Spencer was a religious man. He was a pastor.
The police had nothing to tie him to the murder.
But if Spencer Chase didn't kill Antoinette, who did? Detectives can't be certain, but a secret about her terror-filled ride just days before Antoinette's death is about to blow the case wide open.
He was driving crazy and she said that you're not going to kill me in this car with you.
While investigating the murder of D.C. area resident Antoinette Chase, Prince George's County detectives have discovered that her marriage to husband Spencer was in dire straits.
But according to friends and family, the final split between Spencer and Antoinette was mutual and it was amicable.
That is until Antoinette's daughter Monique comes forward with additional information regarding a conversation she overheard between her mother and Spencer 2 days prior to Antoinette's murder.
Why? Why would you do this? What about the kids?
According to Monique, it all began when Antoinette and Spencer returned from church earlier than expected.
When I heard the front door open, I heard all this crying, but it wasn't my mother crying. And then I realized it was Spencer.
There's nothing that I can do.
Baby,
I can't do this anymore.
Monique says soon after, Antoinette came to her room and told her what had happened.
Antoinette had actually initiated her planned breakup talk in the car with Spencer. It's just always something with this. We were headed to church today and just got into the biggest fight. I've really been thinking about things and I don't think this is gonna work.
Antoinette told Monique that at first, Spencer seemed to agree that their marriage was essentially over. But as the conversation continued, he became more and more upset.
He asked her, did she still love him? Because he didn't love her anymore. And she said she felt relieved that he felt that way. And she agreed, no, I don't love you anymore.
Antoinette told Monique that's when things spiraled out of control.
What? You don't love me anymore?
When she actually admitted that she didn't have feelings for him anymore, he got hysterical, and that's when he started driving really fast. She just had to start screaming at him, you need to pull over and let me drive.
Monique says after she heard this disturbing story, she warned her mother.
Why would you tell him that?
I told her, there's no way that he doesn't love you and want to be with you. I kind of felt like he may try and do something to her.
But Monique's mother assured her daughter she was overreacting.
She said once Spencer calmed down, he actually agreed to the split. Sure, he was emotional, but that's normal after a 20-year marriage. I just don't love him anymore.
To detectives, it's a troubling portrait of a husband unhinged and a wife unwilling to admit the man she once loved has become a threat.
There were many things that Antoinette did not tell us about. The incident in the car. Unfortunately, she did not give us details of the things that were really occurring. But that's so her, you know, trying to always prove.
Chase is rapidly becoming detectives' primary suspect. Building a case against him will be an uphill climb.
You had what you thought was a murder committed by a husband, but you have no way of proving that.
Detective Brown's thoughts returned to Antoinette's missing cell phone.
I felt like that was probably a really important piece to this case. It became an obsession to me that I wanted to find it.
On Sunday morning, May 25th, Detective Brown embarks on his own search for Antoinette's phone.
I had some experience through working with Boy Scouts and plotting maps, and my thought at that point was that maybe we searched the wrong area. So I actually took the GPS coordinates that were provided by the cell phone company and plotted them on a Google site.
His new coordinates lead him down a road not far from the original search area. When it dead ends at a stream, Detective Brown spots a series of storm drain covers.
It just dawned on me that something could potentially be in those.
We started with the first manhole, no luck underneath. Went and lifted a second one, and again, you know, no luck there.
Then, under the third manhole cover, Detective Brown notices something submerged in the murky water.
I saw 2 bags. You could see the outline of a cell phone in one of them. So at that point, I assumed this has to be the cell phone.
An evidence tech eventually confirms Detective Brown's hunch. The phone is Antoinette's. Back at the station, police catalog the evidence.
The first bag not only contained Antoinette's 2 cell phones, but the missing purse was in there as well.
The purse was significant in that the credit cards, her engagement ring, her wedding ring were all found in the purse. Whatever the motive for this crime was, it wasn't robbery.
The second bag contains items that police believe may have been used in the commission of the crime.
We located another extension cord identical to the one found around Antoinette's neck, a pair of what I would call water shoes, then a pair of gloves, and then a towel.
Detectives are hopeful DNA testing will link this evidence to their prime suspect, Spencer Chase. But there's one big problem.
We asked Mr. Chase if he would consent to his DNA, which he refused.
You would think if you're trying to catch the killer of your spouse, why wouldn't you provide your DNA unless possibly you had something to hide?
With a court order in hand, detectives compel Spencer to submit his DNA.
Spencer Chase's DNA and all the items were submitted to the lab, which takes typically several months for testing.
For Monique's family and friends, not knowing is the hardest part. But something
that the truth will come out, and eventually the person who did it is going to pay for it.
I came to know who Antoinette was through her daughters and the various people that knew her, and to watch them cry and suffer and be so emotionally, it became really evident to me that this was a caring person and someone that never deserved anything like this. And that just motivated me to work this case and do whatever I could to try and bring closure.
After identifying Antoinette Chase's husband, Spencer, as the prime suspect in her murder, Prince George's County detectives sent his DNA out for analysis on May 26, 2008.
I had to obtain a search warrant to get his DNA, which he had no choice in the matter.
They hope that comparing his DNA to items disposed of by Antoinette's killer in the storm drain will help tie him to the crime.
While waiting for the results, detectives continue building their case against Spencer Chase.
We took pictures of the items that were recovered and showed them to Antoinette's daughter, Monique.
The shoes that were in the bag were actually some swim shoes that I had got Spencer from a prior vacation.
Detectives also subpoena Spencer's phone records from the day of the murder.
We were able to determine that the phone is actually in the area of the storm drain. So we knew from 11 to 12 he was in that area.
This also happens to be the same area where Spencer said he was running those errands all day long. Those time-stamped receipts, those ended up being his undoing.
We drove the route to see how long it would take to get to those locations. We learned that he had the time to place those items in the storm drain and return to the house before calling 911.
Finally, in September 2008, the much-anticipated DNA results come in from the lab.
Based on the DNA findings, the lab was able to tell us that the only 3 DNA profiles they found were Antoinette, Spencer, and Monique, which would be consistent with the fact that she lived in the house. No other individuals were found that could have potentially been involved, so it became clear based on that who the suspect was, that Spencer, in fact, had murdered Antoinette.
On September 22nd, 2008, with an arrest warrant in hand, detectives close in on their suspect.
We stopped him on traffic stop and took him into custody at that point.
Hello? That afternoon, Detective Brown breaks the news to Antoinette's daughter that her stepfather has been charged with first-degree murder.
Thank you for the update. I almost dropped the phone. I mean, I know they were working on it, but it had been months. It was just like such a relief, and I just like collapsed and just sobbed.
A year and a half later, in June 2010, Spencer's trial gets underway in a Prince George's County courtroom. In the prosecution's opening statements, they paint Spencer Chase as a scorned spendthrift husband who refused to set his wife free.
Couldn't handle Antoinette wanting to walk away from him. The anger and frustration boiled over to the point where he finally said, okay, I'm going to take your life.
Antoinette was his meal ticket. And once she was gone, Spencer realized that the lifestyle that she had given him was probably gone now.
The analogy that I used was that it was a teapot. And you have a teapot with still water, and certainly it's very calm. But once you introduce some heat, it gets warmer, and it gets warmer to the point where eventually the water boiled and the top blew off.
Prosecutors theorize that on the day of the murder, Spencer waited for Antoinette's daughter Monique to leave the house. Then he snuck up behind his unsuspecting wife.
The state's attorney explained how he had to pull the cord with so much force and that he had to actually lift her off the ground, and when he did that it broke the bones in her neck.
After that, Spencer disposed of her personal items in the storm drain, faked an alibi, then called 911.
It was merciless. It was ruthless. How could he love someone that he would immediately take the life of in such a brutal way?
To seal their case, the prosecution introduces phone records and DNA evidence, linking Spencer to the items recovered in the storm drain. But as far as the DNA goes, defense attorneys proffer an alternate explanation to jurors.
There's an easy out for Spencer to say, well, yeah, my DNA's on it, but guess what? You took it from my house. Of course my DNA is going to be on it. The defense's goal was to say that this was somebody else. It couldn't have been Spencer Chase. Spencer Chase came home and found his wife.
For Antoinette's friends and family, though, it's a tough argument to swallow.
I remember sitting in the trial and I'm just thinking, why are we here? We know you did it. You know you did it.
His son sat in the courtroom with my family. He said to me several times, Aunt Janet, I know he killed my mother. Even his son was convinced that he did it.
On June 11, 2010, after 2 weeks of testimony, the court adjourns for deliberation. It doesn't take long for the jury to return with their verdict.
When they finally came back and they said that he was guilty, we were all so excited. I mean, we cried, we hugged each other.
It was very gratifying to be there that day. We had done what needed to be done and got some closure for the family.
But for Antoinette's daughter Monique, the verdict is a bittersweet victory.
I was hopeful that he would be found guilty, but I still have these thoughts swirling in my mind like, this is the person I grew up with for 20 years. He was like a father to me, so when that day that I lost her, I lost him too.
On August 27, 2010, Spencer Chase is sentenced to life in prison. But 5 years later, there's one last gut-wrenching twist.
One day, I got a phone call saying, hey, Spencer is up for a reconsideration of sentencing hearing.
When Spencer appears in court on August 25, 2015, no one is prepared for what happens next.
Spencer got up and actually admitted that he killed her. He loved her and that he couldn't deal to be without her.
After he admits to doing what he did, Spencer then goes onto this tirade of information about how he deserves to be out.
It was just ludicrous to me how he's asking for leniency and mercy. He didn't show my mother any.
The presiding judge rejects Spencer's plea for leniency and rules he must serve out the duration of his life sentence.
You did it, you're where you belong, and I hope you live a long time so you can serve out your life sentence. I just don't really know how to explain that feeling of I don't have a mother. She's gone. There's no more. It's just a very unsettling feeling.
A 26-year-old woman steps out of her office and into oblivion.
She left at 7:30 for a coffee break and never returned.
This was so uncharacteristic. She completely disappeared.
The only clue left behind is a car engulfed in flames.
It threw up signs immediately that this was not going to end well.
It was devastating. It was heartbreaking. Every day I went by, it was less likely that we would actually find her alive.
The ensuing investigation leads authorities down a dark path of passion and betrayal, and a decade-long search for the truth.
There was another side of her that her family didn't know about.
He seemed to be a young man who snapped.
This case had it all. Sex, lies, murder, you name it.
August 24th, 2004. It's just after midnight, and two young women are wrapping up a late-night workout at a 24-hour gym in the Boston suburb of Revere. In the far corner of the gym's parking lot, they see something that takes their breath away.
The 2002 Honda Civic, it was on fire.
It was a fairly prominent location to burn a car.
One of the women immediately calls 911.
Yeah, I need to report a car on fire. The fire is raging, and if they don't get it put out, the car could explode and potentially endanger.
Others have extinguished the blaze. Fire marshals then check the charred vehicle for signs of human remains.
It doesn't look like the car was occupied at the time of the fire.
Thank God for that.
Nothing else of note was found in the car other than the fact that the key was in the ignition.
While it appears no one was injured, it quickly becomes apparent that the fire was set on purpose.
There was an accelerant that was used to torch the car. This was the signal, I think, to investigators early on that this was likely a case of foul play.
Were you able to grab the VIN number?
Barely, but we got it.
Running the vehicle's identification number, investigators discover that the car belongs to Julaine Jules, a 26-year-old woman who lives with her parents in the nearby town of Malden. Shortly after 2 a.m., detectives arrive at Julaine's home and inform her parents they have discovered their daughter's fire-gouged vehicle.
Her family were understandably terribly distraught.
So, Julaine, was she in the car?
No, ma'am, it appears not.
So she's still alive?
Well, we're still investigating. Do you have any idea what she might be?
No, she works from 3 to midnight. She's always home by now.
The family answers all of the detectives' questions, hopeful of any lead on where Julaine may have gone, but they can tell the situation was serious.
This was so uncharacteristic of Julaine. It left everybody asking the question, where did she go? And why would she leave? And what happened to her?
Born in Cambridge, Massachusetts on June 21st, 1978, Julaine Jules was the oldest of 4 children born to Jermaine and Jules Vincent, Haitian immigrants who were proud to be in America.
It's a strong community rooted in faith and in hard work and people who are devoted to their children and to their education.
Julaine's parents enrolled her in the prestigious St. Clement's High School, where her passion for life was as infectious as her smile.
I remember Julie Jules as the girl with a big smile who looked at the world as an open art, who wanted to do it all. And sometimes she'd be like, I want to read my latest poem.
She was always writing about love and the man of her dreams.
She wanted to go off to college, and she wanted to be married. We all talked about it.
Though Julaine was desperate to meet her Mr. Right, her parents enforced a strict no-dating policy throughout high school.
They having us dance at school. Should I go?
No.
Listen to your mother. Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready, okay?
Julane's family was very, very religious. They would probably look more rigid to most people, but it was how the family functioned.
While everybody was more worried about what they're going to wear for prom, where their date's going to be, where they're going Friday night, she had to be home. She was spending quality time with her siblings and still living those traditional family values. Nothing fazed her. Nothing troubled her.
After graduating from St. Clements near the top of her class, Julane enrolled in Emmanuel College in the heart of Boston.
In college, she started really focusing on career or where she wanted to go in life. Julane was the first of the family to actually went to college and graduate. My parents were extremely excited.
With a degree in communications, Julane landed a well-paying job providing customer service to Boston's financial elite.
Guess we have a new star account coming up.
She was working for a credit card concierge company. For instance, if you need services, anything from dry cleaning to an elephant in a circus, she handled those requests.
Though Julane's career had taken off, she continued to live with her parents, an arrangement that certainly put a damper on her dating prospects.
Julane was like any other young woman, wanted to date young men her age. Her mother and father kept close tabs on her, which resulted in her having to be creative in being able to socialize.
The nature of Julane's job meant that her schedule was always changing and she was working all times of day. This made it really easy for her to cover up a secret love life. Men definitely noticed her and she clearly noticed them back. But make no mistake, she was looking for her Prince Charming, not just some one-night stand.
I think she wanted to wait to see if she would find out one and possibly present it to the family. I think she really wanted to make an impression on my parents.
But on August 24th, 2004, Julane's search for Mr. Right would be put on hold. That's when authorities discover her car engulfed in flames, with Julane nowhere in sight.
It could be that she's alive and well, but we were certainly considering it a suspicious missing persons case.
And as authorities dig deeper into Julane's personal life, they will soon uncover a series of secrets that may have led to her disappearance.
We know that Julane was somebody that was inexperienced with really dating, and it might have made it difficult for her to recognize danger. There's a tendency to mistake obsession for romantic overture.
Tuesday, August 24th, 2004. 26-year-old Julane Jules was scheduled to arrive home from work shortly after midnight. But when her vehicle is discovered in flames an hour later, there is no sign of the beautiful young woman.
They knew something was wrong. She was not the type of a young woman who was going to disappear and not come home.
With the car fire destroying any possible evidence, detectives head to where they believe Julane was last seen, her place of employment.
Detectives believe if Julane's employer can pinpoint that she left work around midnight, then they can narrow down the time and the area that they have to account for her whereabouts. But in speaking to Julane's employer, they realize she's been missing for a lot longer than they thought. Thank you for calling. My name is Sheila. How may I help you?
She was working the 3 to midnight shift, and sometime that evening around 7 o'clock, she told her coworkers that she was going to get a cup of coffee.
I'll be back.
She took her keys and her cell phone with her.
She left her wallet behind, and it was reported that it seemed like she left in a hurry and as if she was going to come right back.
What can you tell us about Julane's sleep? Nothing really. I know that she was upset about something. I'm not exactly sure what.
According to Julane's employer, she never returned from her break.
It's really quite peculiar that she would just leave like that. It was urgent enough that she stepped out and left, but didn't take anything with her.
This is Jessica. She's a co-worker of Julane, Detective Francis.
I can tell you she was really upset. She was getting phone calls all day on her cell phone and on her work phone. And eventually she just stopped answering. A little bit later, then she took a call from her friend Melissa.
Melissa?
If you'd like, we can access her voicemail, if that'll help you out at all.
While most of the messages on Julane's work line don't point to any leads, investigators key in on one call that came in roughly 2 hours prior to her abrupt departure.
Next message.
Julane, please give me one more chance. Or at least let's just clear the air. they had retrieved a voicemail off of her work phone from some person identifying himself as Shabazz, saying, "Come to see him."
Unsure who this mysterious Shabazz is, authorities reach out to Julane's friend, Melissa Martin, who agrees to meet with them that afternoon.
Melissa was shocked and surprised to hear that anything was happening to Julane. Do you know what happened to her? Do you think she's okay?
Do you know anything about a man named Shabazz?
Shabazz, yeah, that's my cousin.
Shabazz Augustine was a young man of Trinidadian extraction. He was raised in Boston and was native to the city.
He was 25 years old, a year younger than Julane. Worked at a dentist's office.
You don't think that he has anything to do with her missing, right?
We don't know. We just would like to talk to him.
Shabazz would never do anything to hurt Julane.
Melissa explains that Shabazz and Julane's budding romance seemed straight out of one of Julane's many love poems.
My sense was that Shabazz was somebody who showered a lot of attention on Julane, brought her gifts, spent money on her.
Him and Julane have been dating for like 6 months. According to Melissa, they met by chance. Shabazz was driving and saw Julane walking down the street and just fell in love at first sight. He asked her out right there on the spot.
What's up? What's your name?
The way Melissa describes it, Shabazz completely worshipped the ground that Julane walked on. He had big plans for their relationship. She wanted to take things a little more slowly, and he completely respected that.
While the relationship was still kept under wraps from Julane's family, she did meet his family, and that includes his cousin Melissa. For the few that didn't know about the relationship, they thought it worked.
Has something.
It's beautiful.
Shabazz wanted to meet her family, express his love for her to them, but she was hesitant, and that caused a little bit of drama.
Drama that Melissa Martin says came to a head the weekend of August 19th.
As she understood it, Shabazz and Julane had a bit of a rift earlier in the weekend.
Melissa wasn't really clear about the details, but she was sure it was about their relationship and how fast it should be moving.
All I know is that after the argument, Julane wouldn't answer any of his phone calls. And so Shabazz reached out to me. He wanted my help. He had some sort of big romantic plans or something.
He said, "Listen, I need you to do me a favor. I want you to call Julane at work and do whatever it is that you need to do to get her to come to my house."
Melissa says that Shabazz had taken a page from Julane's book and had written her a poem to profess his love. He was convinced this gesture could help get the couple past this hurdle.
So she thought that this was an opportunity to do something lovely for her cousin, and so she was very excited to participate. Melissa explained that she called Julane around 4:45 p.m. and begged her to hear him out, if only for a few minutes. I think I'm about to take care of some business. I'll be back.
Julane gave in and agreed to give him another shot.
Melissa says that Shabazz was excited to share his poem with Julane, but he never got that chance.
Melissa called Mr. Augustine and asked him, "Hey, how did everything go?" At which point he told Melissa she never came over.
Do you have a number for Shabazz?
Yes.
After receiving his contact information, detectives pay Shabazz a visit at the home he shares with his mother in nearby Dorchester.
What happened to Julane?
We were kind of hoping you would help us out with that.
Once inside, Shabazz seemed concerned. His story matched pretty closely with Melissa's account of the events.
Mr. Augustine fully acknowledged that he had asked Melissa to get Julane to leave work.
I wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to talk to me. So I tried to get my cousin to convince her to come over.
He indicated, however, that she never showed up.
I'm serious. Were you two pretty hot and heavy?
Me and Julane? No, it wasn't even like that. I mean, she's great and all, but she's not my main girl.
Actually, he said that he was more seriously dating a young woman named Keisha.
Was she dating other people too?
Not that I'm aware of.
Police aren't sure what to make of this. Is this a guy covering up his heartbreak? Is he telling the truth, or is he hiding something more sinister?
Mind if I take a look around?
Sure, come on back.
Shabazz allows the investigators to look around the home, but they find nothing that suggests Shabazz had anything to do with Julane's disappearance.
We did the best we could. We looked for blood, which we did not find. We looked for any other kinds of evidence, but eventually the only DNA we found was Mr. Augustine's and his mother's.
It's really odd. On one hand, Shabazz seems to be very cooperative and seems to care, but why is his description of the relationship so different from that of his cousins? Something seems amiss.
The mystery of Julane's disappearance only deepens when authorities obtain a warrant for her cell phone records.
As they review her call records, they see all the missed calls from Shabazz and the call from Melissa. But during the same time period, Julane is calling and receiving calls from another number over and over.
Police track the number to a man who lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a man named Marlon Brown. Reading the text messages between Julane and Marlon, investigators realize there's more to Julane's secret dating life than they were initially led to believe.
The text message records revealed many conversations between Marlon and Julane, including flirtatious exchanges and plans on when they would meet up. It was clear that they were involved in a whirlwind romance.
When police started to uncover that she was dating multiple men, it sounds like perhaps maybe there was another side of her that her family didn't know about.
Investigators began to wonder, has Julane, who's a dating novice, gotten in too deep by dating two men at once? And how does this tie into the burned out car? This could still be a random act, a carjacking, an abduction, or it could be the makings of a love triangle gone awry.
We don't know what was going on here. It's just unclear as to what happened to her after she left her office.
One thing detectives know for sure, they need to track down Marlon, and they need to do it now.
August 27th, 2004. It's been 3 days since 26-year-old Julane Jules vanished from her office in South Boston. Having uncovered evidence that Julane was secretly dating not one but two men, investigators sit down with her family in hopes of obtaining additional information.
So, do the names Shabazz or Marlon mean anything to you?
No. Should they?
While Julane's parents were in the dark about her dating life, a select few of her relatives were not.
So what are you insinuating about my daughter?
Dad, there's something you should know about Julane.
Her brother explained to Mom and Dad that Julane was still the good girl they knew and loved, but she started dating because she desperately wanted to find the perfect man.
But in the opinion of Julane's brother, Julane was seeing Shabazz Augustine, but it wasn't that serious, and she had decided that he wasn't the one for her.
Marlon was, by all accounts, the person that she really liked.
When the two met, Marlon was smitten. There was an instant connection.
Marlon worked on a cruise ship, so he traveled a lot, but anytime he had free time, he traveled to Boston to see Julane.
In fact, he had come to visit Julane the weekend leading up to her disappearance.
It's all about you tonight. Girl, you look beautiful. Look at you.
Thank you.
I'm missing you.
She had been dating him for several months. He flew up from Fort Lauderdale to Boston, and they were together for a couple of days. Shabazz is out of the picture. She had told him previously that she was going to be busy for those days.
Shabazz and Marlon didn't know anything about each other up to this point. A member of Julane's family explained that Shabazz had actually been texting and calling Julane all throughout this romantic weekend with her other boyfriend. So both guys caught on to her game pretty quickly.
Who is this?
It's just Shabazz.
Shabazz? Who is Shabazz?
Needless to say, Marlon was upset. He thought he and Julane were exclusive.
He's nobody.
You don't know who you want. I don't got time for it.
August 24th rolls around, and all of a sudden, she turns up missing.
Investigators have to really wonder if Marlon could have harmed Julane in some jealous rage after discovering the other man in her life.
After speaking with Julane's family, investigators attempt to reach Marlon Brown.
With Marlon not answering, detectives cast their search net even wider and determined that Marlon had left the country.
Air flight records verify that Marlon left the country August 26th. That's the day after Julane went missing.
While police would like to speak to Marlon, they have no cause to extradite him back from Haiti just yet.
There's no proof that he's connected to Julane's disappearance, and other than the burned out car, there's no evidence that a felony of any sort has occurred.
Until Marlon comes back into the country or someone finds Julane, there's not much more the police can do.
Weeks pass with no new developments. Then on September 19th, nearly a month after Julane disappeared, a woman's body surfaces in the Charles River, 3 miles from Julane's work.
A rower in the Charles River spots what appears to be a body near the Longfellow Bridge.
The body was found wrapped in plastic, tied up with chains and then also had weights attached to make sure that the body would sink to the bottom. So whoever had done this wanted to make sure that she would never resurface.
Eventually, some of the weights fell off of the bag, and as a result, her body surfaced under the bridge.
The body is described as that of an African-American female, approximately 5 feet 4 inches. Basically, a near identical description of Jelaine Jules.
The remains are delivered to the medical examiner's office, but they are unable to positively ID the body right away.
There had been some disfiguration as well as decomposition due to the fact that she had been submerged under the water.
They couldn't recognize her, so they used dental records to identify her body and came to the worst conclusion.
I remember sitting on the porch and watching detectives walk up to the house. They said they ran all the tests, that this body was Jelaine Jules. Like, everything just went completely dark. I didn't know what to feel. Like, all I felt was just enormous pain.
Though the body has been identified as that of Jelaine, the autopsy yields little information about her true cause of death.
We really weren't able to get a clear picture of how she died. There was no obvious injuries like gunshot wound or a stab wound or blunt force trauma.
That meant that it could have been an asphyxiation of some kind. Now, asphyxiation simply means the death from suffocation. It could come from strangulation.
But with none of the usual damage found to the neck area, investigators wonder, could a cold-hearted killer have put Jelaine in the Charles River alive?
It's a disturbing possibility. One you shudder to think about, but a very real one.
Who would do this to somebody who was so lovely? Who would disregard her body in such a gruesome manner?
The violent, morbid nature of the attack suggests Julaine's murder was personal, which leads detectives back to 2 suspects, Shabazz and Marlon.
It's been days since Jelaine Jules' body was found in Boston's Charles River. With the shocking revelation of a love triangle, investigators have been circling around a pair of potential suspects. And while they've all but cleared boyfriend number 1, Shabazz Augustine, detectives have been unable to track down boyfriend number 2, Marlon Brown.
Shabazz raised some suspicion because he was trying to act as if he wasn't that into Jelaine.
She's not my main girl.
But detectives haven't ruled out Marlon Brown either. Then, just before Julaine's funeral, the miraculous happens.
Have you seen Marlon?
Marlon shows up at police headquarters. He claims he's just heard about what's happened to Jelaine, and he grabbed the first flight to Boston.
Like Shabazz Augustine, Marlon seems genuinely distressed about Jelaine's death. And when they question him, he appears ready and willing to answer every question.
Tell us about the last time you saw Jelaine. Did you guys have some kind of argument?
Well, no, it started really great, but then she started receiving phone calls from some other guy. I wound up driving home early so she could take the time to figure out who she wanted to be with. And you live in Florida, right? Yes, sir.
Do you recall the day you left Boston?
The day he gives was August 22nd, a day before Jelaine was last seen.
The fact that Marlon told police that he drove home is significant. Unlike flights, it's much harder to track if someone is telling the truth. So that leaves us with Marlon's time frame between the 22nd and the 25th unaccounted for.
And if Marlon's timeline is to be believed, he'd be roughly 600 to 700 miles away from Boston at the time that Jelaine disappeared.
What took you to Haiti? I'm a cruise performer.
Do you have access to email and phone when you're at sea?
Yeah, but it's so expensive, I normally don't answer. Did you have your cell phone on when you drove from Boston to Florida? Yeah, but what is this about?
Before they let him go, police ask him to keep them informed of his whereabouts until they can confirm his story by tracking his cell phone information.
To do this, police subpoena Marlon's cell phone records, but his aren't the only ones they're seeking to obtain.
Even though they aren't sure if Shabazz Augustine had anything to do with Jelaine's disappearance, they had wanted to obtain his cell records as well.
While detectives wait on a judge to approve both subpoenas, they decide to bring Shabazz Augustine back in for questioning.
Thanks for meeting with us again.
No problem.
They're hopeful he can shed some additional light on the phone calls that he made to Jelaine while she was spending the weekend with Marlon.
So what was Jelaine's demeanor on the phone? Did you guys yell at each other?
Shabazz essentially gives detectives the same story as the first time they spoke. The couple had been arguing. He got his cousin to convince her to come over, and Julaine no-showed.
Listen, you guys are trying to make it seem like it was some huge blowout. It wasn't even like that.
Okay, easy, Shabazz. These are just basic questions. You don't have to get hot under the collar.
As detectives continue to dig for information about those phone calls and Julaine's state of mind during those calls, he slips up.
I wasn't even with her that weekend. Marlon was.
He brought up the name of the other boyfriend, Marlon.
The problem is that in his previous interview, he claimed to not know if Julaine was seeing anyone else. So this was a clear contradiction.
Now, you said you didn't know Julaine had another boyfriend. How do you know Marlon?
Man, I don't know.
If Shabazz hadn't known Julaine was seeing someone else, how did he know the name Marlon? Police hadn't mentioned that information to him.
Shabazz, where were you at 7 p.m. the night that Julaine disappeared?
I was with my girl Keisha. You got it all wrong.
When they told him that they were going to check Telltale records, he had an emotional breakdown and he couldn't continue the interview.
It's possible that this was his reaction to the thought of looking at murder charges for a crime he didn't commit, but Shabazz didn't do himself any favors by lying to police.
At the same time, Marlon certainly hadn't been put in the clear by anything Mr. Augustine had said either.
So police feel strongly that one of these two men is responsible for Julaine's murder, but they just don't have enough evidence to charge either one of them with the crime.
At least not yet. But in a matter of hours, a bombshell piece of evidence will fall into detectives' laps. Will it expose Julaine's true killer, or only deepen the mystery surrounding her death?
It was a pretty incriminating message. Perhaps not proof of his guilt, but with the other evidence that the investigators were able to assemble, a pretty critical piece.
He said, like, I'm willing to take the consequences of my actions. My emotions got the best of me.
Julaine Jules was a 26-year-old working woman who dreamed of one day finding her Prince Charming. Instead, Julaine ended up dead in the chilly waters of Boston's Charles River, the victim of what appears to be a brutal murder.
All that was really known was that she died by asphyxiation. Whether she was killed before or after she entered the water is unclear.
For the last several weeks, the search for Julaine's killer has centered around two men in her life, Marlon Brown and Shabazz Augustine.
It became really confusing of who was Julaine's murderer. Was it Marlon? Was it Shabazz? It just was really unclear.
Detectives have subpoenaed both Shabazz and Marlon's cell phone records. Finally, a Boston judge grants the order. The first records to roll in are Marlon Brown's.
Activity from cell phone towers showed that Marlon was some 600 miles away driving through Virginia on the night that Julaine went missing and her car was found. This means there's no way that he could have been the killer.
Hours later, Shabazz Augustine's phone records arrive and paint an entirely different story of his whereabouts the night Julaine disappeared.
Mr. Augustine's cell phone records ended up yielding some of the most significant evidence in the case.
The records confirm more than a dozen phone calls to Julaine Jules on the day of her disappearance, none of which are answered, in addition to a conversation with his cousin, Melissa, at around 6 p.m. Still, it's activity later in the night that interests investigators most.
It's about 12 that the car is found burning. Mr. Augustine places a phone call at around 12:30. The records from that phone call show that he's in the approximate location of where the car is found burning.
But remember, his statement to the police was that he was never there. And so the fact that his cell phone was bouncing off of a tower was an enormous piece of evidence in the case.
Shabazz's cell phone records indicate that not only was he in the vicinity of Julaine's vehicle around the time it was set ablaze, he may not have been working alone.
He made a 91-minute phone call that began shortly after midnight, and we eventually determined who the person was that he was speaking to, and that was Keisha.
It's the same Keisha that Shabazz claims is his primary girlfriend.
Oh, it's my girl Keisha.
Was it possible that Keisha and Shabazz conspired to murder Julaine?
While phone records put Shabazz at the scene of Julaine's burning car, it's not strange to think that someone else may have helped him commit the crime, or even been the driving force behind it.
Detectives bring Keisha in for questioning.
What exactly is the relationship between you and Mr. Augustine?
We've been dating off and on for a couple of years now, but to be honest, it's more of like a friends with benefits type situation.
Were you aware that he was dating another woman at the time named Julaine Jules?
Is that the woman they found in the river?
She was very forthcoming about the details of their relationship. She said she knew that he was dating other people, but claimed not to know that Shabazz was dating Julaine.
Wait, do you guys think Shabazz has something to do with that lady's death? This just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, he can be pretty passionate, but he's not that kind of guy.
Well, let's first start with the conversation that you all had on the 24th of August.
He gets on the phone with Keisha, and she then proceeds to talk to him throughout the entire way.
Keisha explained that he was making his way from Revere to his home in Dorchester, taking both a public bus and going on foot.
While Keisha is still convinced that Shabazz wasn't capable of committing murder, she admits that he did say some unusual things during that late-night phone call.
She says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm out running an errand for my mother," which makes no sense.
But according to Keisha, that wasn't all.
He said he had gotten into a pretty nasty fight with a friend and that he was probably never going to see them again.
He said, like, I'm willing to take the consequences of my actions.
He said something about letting his emotions get the best of him, and I didn't think anything of it.
There was no, what I would call a specific confession or admission to the crime, but clearly the references and allusions were that they were discussing the incident.
Have you ever met Julaine?
No, I don't know who that is.
Knowing that he was near where Julaine's car was discovered, this looks bad. But consider this, it could be a weird coincidence. Cell location tracking isn't exact, so it doesn't prove that he's the one who killed Julaine or even destroyed the car.
While Keisha's statement further cements detectives' hunch that Shabazz Augustine is responsible for the death of Julaine Jules, without additional physical evidence, arresting Shabazz is becoming more difficult by the day.
It wasn't like there was any witness to the whole thing. Beyond the fact of the accelerant, there was nothing forensically that could lead us to anything in particular.
Shabazz emerges as their prime suspect, but at this point they also don't have enough physical evidence to indict Shabazz.
Months turn into years, and though the investigation remains open, there are no new developments.
We asked the questions, what's going on with the case, where does this stand? We just didn't get much in the way of an answer other than, it's still active.
No one is more frustrated with the lack of an arrest than Julaine's friends and family.
We were getting frustrated because the prosecutor, they kept telling us, just be patient, but we are working on it.
I was kind of shocked that it took this long. I felt like they had enough evidence that this should have been closed and trial done.
But what friends and family don't realize is that behind the scenes, police in Boston are closing in on Julaine's killer.
My chief goal was, let's start bringing witnesses in and start putting this thing together and find enough evidence to formally charge somebody with a crime.
It's been 4 years since Julaine Jules' body was found in the Charles River, and the case remains unsolved. Those cell phone records place one of Julaine's boyfriends, Shabazz Augustine, near her vehicle at the time of the crime. There's nothing concrete to warrant an indictment.
The family always had a feeling that, he was the culprit. He was the person that actually did this.
I believe the police and investigators did have a pretty good understanding of what likely happened. Their challenge was proving it.
If Shabazz Augustine was in fact involved in the murder of Julaine Jules, there's no sign he intended to run from police.
Shabazz Augustine stayed in Boston, worked in Boston, started a new relationship, and essentially had a family here that kept him rooted in Boston. He was leading a fairly normal life here, almost as though nothing had happened.
This made many wonder if everyone had gotten this case wrong from the get-go. That maybe it wasn't Shabazz or Julaine's other boyfriend, Marlon. Maybe it was a random act of violence.
But in 2008, a change in law enforcement jurisdictions results in Julaine's case being transferred from the county of Middlesex to neighboring Suffolk County. It's a change that breathes new life into the investigation.
The folks in Middlesex County did a good job, but moving the case to Suffolk County allows a fresh set of eyes to look at the case, and it brings a renewed sense of purpose to solving it.
But it was a systematic and painfully slow building of a case.
Over the next 3 years, Suffolk County investigators methodically pour over evidence and re-interview individuals close to Shabazz and Julaine at the time of the crime. Eventually, their hard work pays off. when two of Shabaz's relatives come forward with some shocking information.
Thank you for talking to us. I heard you're the DA over Jelaine Jewell's murder case?
Yes. Know something about it?
Yeah, actually with Shabaz's, Augustine's cousins.
Over the years, Shabazz would say certain things that implicated him as the murderer, things that either sounded remorseful and things that also sounded a bit cocky.
These two individuals recounted an instance in the 2 to 3 days leading up to Julaine's disappearance, in which Mr. Augustine said, "I'm going to take a pillow and I'm going to try to smother you. And when you get to the point where you can't breathe anymore, I want you to tap out."
Hey, man, get up off him, man. Damn.
Man, come on, man. It's just a game, man. Y'all silly.
And unlike strangulation, suffocating someone this way isn't going to leave any marks.
Would you be willing to testify?
Definitely will be. There is more, though.
Mr. Augustine had confessed to the murder to his mother. At some point after the crime, her son had confessed to killing Jelaine.
We may never have gotten this information had that third party not stepped up.
This shocking revelation allows Suffolk County prosecutors to bring the case to the grand jury and ultimately issue an arrest warrant.
Mark called us and told us that they have enough evidence to charge him with the murder of Jelaine. So they arrested him at work.
From what I understand, he was taken into custody without any incident. Very easy process.
Finally, a trial date is set. September 4th, 2012, almost a decade after the murder of Jelaine Jules. But just before the opening gavel is set to drop, Shabaz's defense team makes a surprise move.
Shabazz Augustine is offering to plead guilty to second-degree murder.
On January 27th, 2016, Julaine's family finally gets their day in court.
The terms of the plea deal do not require the killer to admit to any of the details of the murder. But at the sentencing hearing, the DA is allowed to present what the state believes happened the night that Jelaine Jules was murdered.
Prosecutors begin by laying out the events of August 19th, 2004, when Julaine's primary boyfriend, Marlon Brown, met her in Boston for what was to be a romantic weekend.
And as the weekend went on and Shabazz tried to contact Jelaine with big plans for a romantic get-together, he realized she was seeing someone else, and he became furious.
So when you talk motive, my sense of this was that he simply could not wrestle with his own emotions about a woman who didn't share the same feelings towards him. Why she had not returned his phone calls, why she had ignored him basically, and that at some point something was said that caused him to kill her.
Prosecutors believe the only logical explanation was that Jelaine had gone over to Shabazz Augustine's home that night to hear him out.
I'm so glad you came.
What is this?
I'm so sorry that we've been having problems. I wrote you something that you like. Our love has many forms like the river.
But his attempts to woo her fell on deaf ears. Look, I just came over here to be nice and break up with you in person. I don't think this is gonna work.
But I don't understand.
Things went sideways really fast and turned into a heated argument. Something clicked with Shabazz, and he decided that if he couldn't have her, then no one would.
That's not gonna happen.
He attacked her and smothered her with a pillow, suffocating her until she died. It was likely over in seconds.
With Jelaine dead, Shabazz set about disposing of her body.
He has wrapped Julaine's remains in plastic and then used free weights to weight her remains down. He would have had to have transported Jelaine Jules' body per vehicle.
According to prosecutors, after dumping her body in the Charles River, Shabazz then drove Julaine's car to the gym parking lot in Revere and set fire to her vehicle before fleeing the scene, all while conversing with his other girlfriend, Keisha. After hearing the details of Julaine's senseless murder, the judge hands down his sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years.
Jules' mother, Jermaine Vincent, gave a victim impact statement in which she told the court that Shabazz had essentially ripped her precious child from her hands. It was a very, very emotional statement. Lots of tears were being shed in the courtroom.
It brought all feelings back, all wounds opened up. But at the end of the day, Julian's not coming back.
Unfortunately, a case like this doesn't bring many silver linings with it. So the only thing we can take from it is that you find some measure of gratification that the person who did it won't do it again.
She was an incredible woman. She loved people. She loved life. The Mr. Brown is no joke. You know, I think if the family had some insight of what was going on, I think some of this could have been prevented.
Chính xác. Hả? Ế. Tức là dân làm ở gần là mình chế tạo đặt cái gì ra là nó sẽ thành cái đấy hả? Bảo sao mình vừa đặt cái bàn rèn tự dưng có một thợ rèn ở đây. Còn loại bàn gì nữa không? Giấy gỗ. Yes. Đấy.